At 5:10 on the morning of the 14th of October 1943, 21 B-17 sat cold on the hardstands at Wychmere Heath, and the whole of Suffolk smelled of wet barley and aviation fuel. The briefing had named a ball-bearing works in Bavaria. Nobody in the room had said the name of the town out loud. In the control tower, Brigadier General Elias Ward stood at the window with his hands behind his back and watched the first propeller turn over. He was 33 years old. He had signed the order at 20 minutes to 2 that morning and had not slept since. There was no one in England who knew that about him. 21 up, sir, said the duty officer. 21, Ward said. He watched them go out. It took 19 minutes to get 21 bombers off a single runway, and he stayed at the glass for all 19, which was not required of him, and which he had never once skipped. The last ship lifted at 05:34, and the field went quiet in the way it only went quiet twice a day. Wychmere was one of 3 fields. Ward had the 419th Combat Wing. Wychmere Heath, Marlingford and Stoke Ash, 60-odd ships between them on a good morning, and he ran all 3 from a tower on the one where he slept. Marlingford and Stoke Ash telephoned their numbers through by 6. Wychmere he counted with his own eyes. Below, at the edge of the perimeter track, a green Bedford van with Women's Voluntary Service stenciled on the door had its hatch propped open, and a young woman in a headscarf was standing on the running board with a notebook against her knee, writing. "What is she doing?" Ward said. The duty officer looked. "That's the T-van, sir." "I know what the van is." Beatrice Larkin wrote 5:15:21 out, and then under it the last 3 digits of every tail number she could read through the mist in the order they left the ground. Her hand was cold. She wrote V. Bell, Mrs. Bell, Ipswich, beside one of them, and M. Dandridge. Beale beside another, because Mick Dandridge was 22 and from Missouri and had nobody in England at all, so she had put herself down. "You'll wear that pencil to nothing," said Otis Pruitt, holding out his mug. "Then I'll get another pencil," she poured. "Sergeant, whose is 337? Cusack's, the one with the ears." She wrote it down. Down the fence line in the grey, women were already standing. 3 of them, then 5, in headscarves and 1 in a coat too good for a farm lane. They would come back at 4. They always came back at 4. "You do that every morning," Pruitt said. "Somebody ought to." "Ain't nobody asked you to." "That's rather the point of it," B said. "They came home at 17 minutes past 4. B heard them before the field did, a low grinding on the eastern edge of the sky, and she stopped with a crate of mugs in her arms and began to count. That was the thing nobody outside understood. You did not watch. You counted. 16. She counted again as they came over the boundary hedge, wheels down, one of them low and dragging smoke off the number 2 engine. 16. Along the fence a woman began to say a name. Not loudly, just saying it over and over to keep hold of it. Ward was not in the tower. He came down at 4 every afternoon and stood at the head of the dispersal line with the crash crew, 30 yards from the T-van, because a man who signs the order ought to be on the concrete when the answer comes back. Nobody had ever asked him why he did it. The damaged ship came in long and heavy and put its tail down halfway along the runway, and it did not stop where the others stopped. It slewed off the concrete onto the grass with its brakes screaming and slid to a halt 60 feet from the hardstand where B had parked her van, and a piece of the wing was burning. She had the water urn off its bracket before she thought about it. The ambulance was still coming down from the far dispersal. 2 men were dropping out of the waste door, dragging a third between them, and the third one wasn't helping. B ran. She got about 15 yards. A hand closed on her arm from behind and took her off her feet, and she was walking backwards fast whether she wanted to or not. "There are 800 rounds of 50 caliber in that airplane," Ward said. "Get behind the van. There's a man on the grass. There are 3 men on the grass, and I have a crash crew for them, behind the van." The wing tank went with a flat, ugly sound, and the heat crossed the distance and touched her face, and Ward put himself between her and it without appearing to notice he had done it. Ammunition began to go off inside the fuselage in short strings, like a bad idea repeating itself. When it stopped, B's notebook was lying open in the wet grass where she had dropped it. Ward picked it up. He did not hand it back. He turned it towards the light of the burning wing and read 1 page and then another. "These are tail numbers," he said. "Yes. You are standing outside the wire of an operational bomber station, writing down aircraft numbers in a book." "And names," B said. "You've only read the left-hand column." "Miss Larkin." "Miss Larkin, do you understand what that book looks like? Do you understand what it is?" She put out her hand for it. He didn't move. 21 went out this morning and 16 came back, and I know which 16, and by tonight I'll know the other 5 by name. Somebody has to hold the number. All of you go up in the air and none of you can count yourselves. That is not your job." "No," she agreed, "and nobody's been given it." He closed the notebook and gave it back. Behind him the fire crew were laying foam and the sky had gone the color of a bruise. "Stay off my field," Ward said. He had the adjutant pull the file on her that night. There was one. Tare pass issued by the Women's Voluntary Service and countersigned by the station adjutant in July. Under it, a note from the RAF police at Bury St Edmunds dated the 6th of September. Civilian female observed at perimeter recording aircraft numbers. Book examined. No operational significance. Subject vouched for by Fult LTR Ashcombe, liaison, whose family holds the land. Nothing after it. Ward read the last line 3 times. "Somebody looked at this in September," he said, "and put it back in the drawer." "Yes, sir." "Then it stays looked at. Standing order in writing tonight. Nobody on this station touches that woman's book without my signature on it." He handed the file back. "I'll not have a girl turned over for a pencil." At 5 o'clock the next morning, the van was on the hard stand with the hatch up and the urn steaming. Ward saw it from the tower stairs. He stopped on the 3rd step. Pruitt, coming up the other way with the load sheets, stopped too and had the sense to say nothing for 4 full seconds. "You want her removed, General?" "No. Only you said—" "I know what I said, Sergeant." Ward went down the stairs and out across the perimeter track in the dark, and the woman at the van saw him coming and did not stop what she was doing, which was buttering bread. "General." "Miss Larkin, tea or coffee?" "The coffee's yours, it's dreadful." "Coffee." She poured it. He drank it standing up, and it was, as advertised, dreadful. Down the line the engines started 1 and then a dozen, and neither of them tried to talk over it. When the last ship lifted at 0541, she wrote 0541-18 out in the notebook, and Ward watched her write it. And then he walked back to the tower without a word. That was the whole of it. It took 4 minutes. He did it again the next morning. Tom Larkin came up to the guardhouse on the Thursday, with his hat in his hand and 40 years of Suffolk in his jaw. He was shown into an office with a map on one wall and nothing on any of the others. The man behind the desk was younger than his own dead son would have been by very much, and had a star on each shoulder, and Larkin disliked him immediately on principle. "Mr. Larkin, sit down." "I'll stand, thank you." "Suit yourself." "Runway 2, Larkin said, goes through 40 acres of my ground. Good ground, best ground on that farm, and my father had it and his father had it, and in April a man from the ministry came and put a peg in it, and now there's 11 inches of concrete on top." "Yes." "That's all you've got?" "Yes." "It's true," Ward said. "What would you like me to say instead?" Larkin's jaw worked. "You could say sorry for it." "I'm sorry for it. It doesn't give you the field back." Ward stood and came round the desk. "Mr. Larkin, I can't lift that concrete while there's a war on. I can put your compensation through my own office instead of the ministry's, which will make it faster, and I can keep my vehicles off your east track, which they have no business using. That's the whole of what I have. I'd rather tell you that than let you write letters for a year." The old man looked at him for a long moment. "My girl brings you your tea," he said. "She does. She oughtn't be on this base." "I've said so," Ward said. "She doesn't take instruction." "No," said Tom Larkin, "she never has." At 11:15 that night, Pruitt found the General in Hangar 3 with a flashlight, standing under the open belly of a ship that would not be flying again. "You know there's a bed in your quarters, sir." "Sergeant, $200 says you ain't seen it since Tuesday." Pruitt leaned against the wheel and folded his arms. "You want to tell me what you're doing under here at 11 at night?" "Bell," Ward said, "at Cusack, Ostrowski, Dean, Vitelli." Pruitt stopped leaning. "Those are the 5 from Tuesday," Ward said. "Then there's Marchetti, Hobbs, Delacroix, and the 2 gunners from the ship that went down off Cromer in September. Then there's Ridge. I have 308 of them now since I took the wing. I keep them in order. If I lose the order, I start again from Ridge." "General—" "It's not a wound, Otis, it's arithmetic. I signed the order, so I hold the number." Pruitt was quiet. 16 came back Tuesday, he said at last. "Every one of them had a girl or a mother or a wife standing at that fence at 4 o'clock, hollering their heads off. Every single man on this base has got somebody who looks up when the planes come home. That's the point of it." "Who looks up for you?" The flashlight beam didn't move. "Nobody's required to," Ward said. "That ain't what I asked." Outside, an engine coughed and caught on the far dispersal, and somewhere past the wire, a van in need of a new gearbox went grinding away down the lane towards Wychmere St. Mary. On the 9th of November, B. Larkin turned to a clean page at the back of her notebook and ruled a new column, and at the top of it she wrote E. Ward. She looked at it for a while. Then she wrote in the small square beside it, Nobody, and she was still deciding whether to scratch it out when Mick Dandridge put his head through the hatch. B, you gotta settle this. Is a scone a biscuit? Certainly not. Cusack says, Cusack is from Delaware, B said, and has been wrong before. Mick grinned. He had a Missouri face, all cheekbone and optimism, and he was flying his 9th mission the next morning. Put me down as Mick today, not M. Dandridge. I like it better. It's a register, not a valentine. Put me down as Mick. She put him down as Mick. The coffee took 4 minutes. It took 4 minutes every morning for 6 weeks, and by the end of the 2nd week it had stopped being about the coffee. Your hands are blue, Ward said. It's November. You have no gloves. I had gloves. I gave them to a rear gunner with a cracked electric suit, and if you tell him I said so, I'll deny it. The next morning there was a pair of fleece-lined flying gloves on the counter of the van, size small with no note. B put them on. Neither of them mentioned it, then or ever. Calst Roy Prescott mentioned it. Prescott mentioned most things eventually, in the officers' mess warmly, in the tone of a man telling an affectionate story about a friend. Not 500 every morning, rain or shine, he said. The old man goes and stands at a civilian T-van in the dark. Charming, really. He turned his glass. Bit hard to explain to division, but charming. The fog came in on the 22nd and did not lift for 4 days. B found him on the tower balcony at 9 at night with no coat on, looking at a sky he could not see. They're at Bassingbourne, she said. All 18, it came through half an hour ago. The corporal told me on my way past. I know, I got it at 6. Then why are you out here? Because they're not here, Ward said. She set the thermos on the rail beside him. He looked at it. You went home 2 hours ago. I watched the van go out the gate. And then I turned it round. She unscrewed the cup and poured. Sit down, General, you're making me tired. He sat on the ammunition crate by the rail. She sat on the other one. The fog moved across the field in slow sheets, and the flare-path lamps stood in it, like a row of small drowned moons. Can I ask you an unforgivable question? She said. You'll ask it anyway. Where's your family? Millvale, Pennsylvania. My father worked a rolling mill for 31 years and died in the second one. My mother in 38. He turned the cup in his hands. There's an aunt in Erie who sends a card at Christmas addressed to Master Elias Ward. She's 91. I write back. No wife. No. No girl at all. I went to West Point at 17, and I have been moved 11 times in 15 years, Ward said. That's not a tragedy. It's a schedule. B was quiet a moment. You're 33. I'm aware. Youngest brigadier in the 8th, they say. Second youngest. And it isn't a compliment. It means the men above me were killed or moved and somebody had to sign the orders. He glanced at her. You look disappointed. I'm reassessing. Their hands were both on the rail. She noticed it the same moment he did. 3 inches of wet iron between them, and neither of them moved, and neither of them closed it. Down on the field, one aircraft, unannounced, came out of the fog with its landing lights on. Ward was on his feet. That's not ours. That, B said, standing very slowly, is 452. It was 452. Mick Dandridge had lost his formation over the channel, missed Bassingbourne entirely, and come home to Wychmere on a compass, a wristwatch, and the church spire at Woodbridge. He walked into the tower 20 minutes later and found a Brigadier General waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Sir, I can explain the fuel state. Don't, Ward said. I'd have to write it down. 2 nights later, B walked up the lane to Wychmere St. Mary in the dark to a cottage with a blanket over the window and sat at the kitchen table with Mrs. Bell, whose son had been in one of the 5 that did not come back in October. She opened the notebook. He went out at 19 minutes past 5, she said. 3rd off. He'd had his breakfast, I served it him myself, 2 eggs, and he complained about the bread. His name was here. She turned the book so the woman could see the line. And next to it, here it says Mrs. Bell, Ipswich. That's you. I put you there in September. Mrs. Bell put one finger on the page on her own name and left it there. You wrote me down, she said. So he wasn't one of the ones with nobody. Colonel Roy Prescott came to the van on the 21st of December, at a time of day when he knew perfectly well the General would be at division. Miss Larkin, tea if it's going. It's going. He took it and stayed, which none of the officers did, and leaned on the counter with his cap under his arm, as though they were old friends who had simply not met yet. You're rather an institution here. I'm a van. You're the reason 140 men eat breakfast. He tasted the tea and looked pleasantly surprised. May I say a thing badly? I'm going to say it badly regardless, so it's a courtesy question. Say it then. He's 33, Prescott said. There isn't another brigadier that age in this theatre, and there won't be another for a decade. Whatever happens after this war, that man will be somewhere very high up in it. Washington, most likely, planning the next one so we don't lose it. That's not flattery, that's a personnel file. I'm aware what he is. I don't think you are, and I don't say that unkindly. He set the cup down. Every general is a man with a career walking behind him at about 6 feet, carrying everything he's earned. And a career is a delicate object, Miss Larkin. It doesn't get destroyed by anything dramatic. It gets destroyed by a photograph or a paragraph or a woman at a wire. B wiped the counter slowly. Colonel, are you warning me or threatening me? Neither. I'm describing the weather. Prescott put his cap on. You're a kind girl and you're the best thing on this station, and in 18 months you will either be the most important thing that ever happened to him or the reason nothing else did. I don't envy you the arithmetic. Everyone here is so fond of arithmetic, B said. It's a bomber station. He touched the brim of his cap. Thank you for the tea. It's genuinely the only decent tea in Suffolk. She watched him go across the concrete. Then she picked up the notebook and looked at the column at the back with his name at the top of it, and did not write anything in it for 4 days. The hangar dance was on Christmas Eve, and the general did not attend. He stood in his office with the paperwork for a route change and listened to a trumpet in Hangar 3 come and go across the field every time somebody opened the door, and at 9:30, Pruitt came in without knocking and stood there. Sergeant, they asked me to come get you. Who did? Everybody, sir, Pruitt said. That's what I'm telling you. Ward went. The hangar was warm with 200 bodies and hung with parachute silk, and a corporal from Ohio was doing something criminal to a trumpet, and when the general walked in, the whole place turned around at once and then, awkwardly, tried to pretend it hadn't. B was by the trestle tables with her sleeves pushed up. You came. I was brought. Same thing. She dried her hands. There's a rumor the 8th Air Force can dance. The 8th Air Force can. I've never been consulted. Consult yourself, B said. There's 4 minutes of record left. They danced. He was better than he had any right to be, and she told him so, and he said that at West Point it had been a graded requirement, and she laughed loudly enough that Cusack turned round to look. Across the hangar, Rupert Ashcombe, RAF liaison, 29 years old and in beautiful blue, watched the two of them for the length of the record and did not move his face at all. Prescott watched Rupert watching. Awkward, Prescott said pleasantly. Local girl, local expectations. She's been Witchmere since she was born, Rupert said. Well, she's on my field at 5 o'clock every morning, said Prescott, writing in a book, and nobody's ever asked her what's in it. I only mention it. You know the country better than I do. On the 28th, a ship came in with a dead engine and a hydraulic failure, and ground looped onto the grass at the eastern end, and the fuel went up, and everyone got out. There was a photographer from Stars and Stripes on the field that day, taking pictures of the crew chiefs for a Christmas piece. He got one frame that mattered. In it, a burning B-17 fills the left of the picture. In the middle, a young woman in a WVS headscarf is turned half away with a blanket in her arms, and on the right, in profile, close, a Brigadier General has his hand closed around her wrist, pulling her back, though nothing in a photograph can say so, and his face is not the face a general is supposed to have in a photograph. The photographer looked at the negative that night and whistled. Rupert Ashcombe came to the Larkin kitchen on New Year's Eve, with a bottle for Tom and a small box he never opened. B. Rupert, walk out with me. It's sleeting. Then don't. He put the box on the table between the bread and the lamp. My mother's. I've had it since I was 23, and I've been waiting for you to grow up. And you have, and there's a war on, and I'm tired of being patient. Marry me. You'd have Ashcombe and 40 rooms, and your father would never take another tenancy in his life. B sat down slowly. Rupert, look at me a minute. She pushed the box back across the table gently so it did not scrape. You've never once asked me what I do all day. You give out tea. I count aeroplanes, she said, out and back, every day since September, and you've watched me do it for 4 months and never asked me why, because it never occurred to you that I might be doing anything at all. And he asked, I suppose, Rupert said. She did not answer that. He's a general, Beatrice. He'll be in Italy by summer or dead, and you'll be a farm girl who was talked to kindly once. He picked up the box. His hand was steady and his voice was not. I've known you since you were 17. I know. That ought to count. It does, B said. It just doesn't count for that. He was gone before midnight. He drove the 8 miles to Wychmere Heath instead of home and sat in his car outside the guardhouse for 20 minutes in the sleet. And then he drove to Bury St Edmunds and, on the 3rd of January, filed a report with Provost Marshal's section 4 paragraphs long on the subject of a local civilian woman observed recording aircraft numbers at the wire of an operational bomber station. He was careful. He did not put her name in it. He put down that she was known to be personally close to the station commander. The photograph ran on the 11th of January on page 3 under the caption Wychmere, a general at the sharp end. Prescott brought it into the office himself, folded open, and laid it on the desk with the air of a man doing a friend a service. They've been very decent about it, he said. It's a good picture. It's a wonderful picture, actually. That's the trouble. Ward looked at it for a long moment. It's a fire on a hardstand, he said. Sir, with respect, it is not. Look at your own face. Prescott turned the paper round and tapped it with 2 fingers. Division will see this. ECA's staff will see this. And every one of them will ask the same question, which is not, who is she, but how long? Nothing has happened. That has never once been the relevant question in this army. On the 19th, the wing went to Halberstadt on a route that had been changed at 48 hours' notice, and the flak was waiting at the turning point. 9 ships did not come back. It was the worst day Wychmere ever had. 90 men. Ward's count went from 386 to 476 between 1 o'clock and 4, and he did not need paper for it. B counted them home at 3:10. She counted twice and then a third time, standing on the running board with her hand flat on the roof of the van, and the fence went quiet the way it did when the number was bad. She wrote the number down. Then she got the urn going, because there were still 108 men landing who would need something hot in their hands. Ward stood on the tower balcony and did not come down for an hour. By Friday, there was a team from Yeta Bomber Command in the briefing hut going through the route file page by page, because a turning point that had been changed at 48 hours' notice does not get flak waiting at it by accident. On Monday, Provost pulled a 4-paragraph report out of a drawer in Bury St Edmunds and read it again. They took the notebook at 9:06 on the morning of the 1st of February. B was inside the van with her back turned, cutting bread, and when she came out there were 3 men in white helmets on the hardstand and a captain of the Provost Marshal's section holding her notebook, which had been on the passenger seat where it always was, under her gloves. "Ma'am, is this yours?" "Yes, give it back, please." He didn't. He was turning the pages with a pencil, not his fingers, and B watched him do it and understood quite suddenly and completely how it looked. 51 pages, dates, times, tail numbers, numbers up, numbers back, and on the good days weather. "Miss Larkin, I'm going to ask you to come with us." Down the line, Mick Dandridge came out from under a wing with a wrench in his hand and started walking. Hey, that's B. Mick." She said it without raising her voice. "Go back to your aeroplane." "B, go back to your aeroplane and don't be a fool in front of the Provost Marshal." She untied her apron and folded it on the counter and set the gloves on top of it and closed the hatch. Her hands were shaking so hard it took her 2 tries with the catch. "Captain, my father's a tenant at Larkin's on the Woodbridge Road. Somebody's to tell him where I've gone before he hears it in the village." "That'll be seen to." "It won't," B said, "but thank you." Prescott got to Ward first. He had it timed to the minute. "Before you do anything," he said, closing the door behind him, "hear me for 90 seconds. Who lifted my standing order?" "Provost Marshal's section doesn't require your signature, sir. It requires an open security file, and as of Tuesday there is one." Prescott did not move from the door. "Nobody went round you. They went above you. There's a difference and you'll want it later." "Where is she?" "Bury St Edmunds. She's not under arrest, she's under questioning, and she has been for 2 hours, and there is not one single thing you can do about it that does not make it infinitely worse." Prescott stayed by the door. "Sir, Elias, listen. This runs its course. They'll hold her a week. They'll find nothing. They'll let her go, and it will be unpleasant, and it will be over. And nobody will ever put your name in a paragraph with the word security. You do nothing. You have never in your life had a better reason to do nothing." "And if they don't find nothing," Ward said, "if they find 51 pages of aircraft movements in a civilian's handwriting and a photograph of me holding her arm, and they decide that's a shape they recognize, then you will still be the man who did nothing," Prescott said, "which is the only part of this you control." Ward looked at him for a long moment. "How long have you wanted this wing, Roy?" Prescott's face did not move. That's beneath you, sir. It's an honest question. I've never held it against you. You were 40 when they gave a 33-year-old the star you'd earned twice, and you've been perfectly correct about it for 8 months. And you told an RAF liaison officer in December that nobody had ever asked what was in her book. Ward stood. He was in the mess for 11 minutes that night. I read the log. You read the mess log. I read everything, Colonel. It's the only thing I'm actually good at. Tom Larkin was at the guardhouse before dark, and this time he did not take his hat off. They stood in the lane outside the wire because Ward went out to him rather than have him brought in. They've got my daughter in a room in Bury, Larkin said. I know. Because of your aeroplanes, on my ground. His voice was low and even and worse for it. I lost my boy in 41, North Atlantic, 19, and she has stood at that wire every morning since with a pencil in her hand because she couldn't stand the thought of any other mother getting a telegram about a lad that nobody was waiting for. That's what's in that book. That's all that's ever been in that book. I know what's in the book, Mr. Larkin. Then get her out. I'm going to do worse than that, Ward said. The old man stared at him. There's a report on file, Ward said. Whatever they decide in Bury St. Edmunds, that report exists, and in 6 months when somebody in London wants an answer about Halberstadt, they'll pull it out of a drawer, and her name will still be sitting in it, and there will be no finding on it either way. A dismissal isn't an answer. She'll be the woman they let go. He looked down the lane towards the village. So I'm going to convene a board of inquiry on my own station and put every part of it on the record in front of witnesses, and I am going to make somebody stand up and say out loud what they think she is. You'd put her in front of a court. I'd put her in front of a finding, Ward said. There's a difference, and it's the only thing I have to give her. Larkin was quiet for a while. And what happens to you? That's not the arithmetic I'm doing. They let her out on the 9th of February. They did not give the notebook back. She was on the hard stand the next morning at 5 o'clock because there were 140 men on that base who took their breakfast out of her van, and if she did not come, the story would tell itself. Ward walked out to her in the dark. The urn was going. She had no notebook and her hands did not know what to do. Coffee, he said. It's dreadful. General, I've convened a board, he said. 14th of March in the briefing hut on this station. You'll be asked to attend. She set the cup down very slowly. You've done what? There's a report on file. I want it answered, not shelved. They had me in a room for 8 days, B said. 8 days of a man saying, and what does the general talk to you about, Miss Larkin, in 9 different ways? And I came out of it, and the first thing I did was come back here at 5 in the morning so that nobody in this village could say I'd been sent away. And now you want me to stand in a hut and do it again in front of the whole base? Yes. Why? Because they took the book, Ward said. And a dismissal doesn't give it back to you, a finding does. She turned away from him. Out on the field, the first engine caught and coughed and settled, and then another, and she stood with her arms folded and watched them turn over in the dark. Who reported me, she said. Ward didn't answer. You know, B said, you've known since the first day. Yes. Say it. No, Ward said. He's going to say it on the 14th of March, on the record, standing up with his name on it. She looked at him then, properly, for the first time in 9 days. You're a frightening man, she said. Nobody's noticed because you're polite. I've been told. They set the briefing hut with a trestle table at the front for the board, a chair at the side for witnesses, and 40 seats behind. All 40 were taken by 8:30. Men stood along both walls and in the doorway and out onto the concrete, and nobody had ordered them there and nobody sent them away. B sat in the second row in her good coat, between her father and Otis Pruitt. Prescott presented. He did it well because he did everything well. Sir, the board has 3 documents. A report from Flight Lieutenant Ashcombe, RAF, dated the 3rd of January, a photograph published on the 11th of January, and a notebook, 51 pages, seized on the 1st of February, containing dates, times, aircraft numbers, and aircraft movements at this station over a period of 5 months. He set them down in a row. The board is not asked to find that this woman is an agent. The board is asked whether this pattern of contact and record-keeping constitutes a breach of security. In my submission it plainly does, and the remedy is straightforward. The civilian is barred from the station, and the matter is closed. And the station commander, said the senior member of the board, a full colonel down from division, is a matter for another room, sir, Prescott said, as I think everybody here understands. They called Ashcombe at 9:10. He came up in beautiful blue and gave his name and rank and swore his oath, and he did not look at the second row. "Flight Lieutenant, is that your report?"
"It is."
"Read the fourth paragraph, please." He read it. It sounded worse aloud than it had in a drawer. "Known to be personally close to the station commander. Recommend the association be examined." "Thank you. Sit down, Flight Lieutenant." "General Ward has 2 questions," said the colonel. Ward stood at the end of the table with his hands behind his back. "Flight Lieutenant Ashcombe, you wrote that report on the 3rd of January. "Yes, sir." "When did you first see Miss Larkin writing in that notebook at the wire?" A pause, 2 seconds. Everyone in the hut heard it. "To September." "September of 1943. "Yes, sir." 4 months, Ward said. "You saw a civilian recording aircraft movements at an operational bomber station, and you did nothing about it for 4 months. Second question." He let it sit. "What happened on the 31st of December?" Ashcombe's jaw set. "That's a private matter. You put her in a security file, Flight Lieutenant. There's no private matter left. What happened on the 31st of December? The silence in the hut went on a long time. "I asked her to marry me," Rupert Ashcombe said. "She refused me. And 3 days later you filed that report." "Yes." "No further questions," Ward said. Nobody moved. Rupert stood and walked the length of the hut, and 40 men and a full colonel watched him do it, and he got outside before his face changed. "General," said the colonel, "you asked to enter the notebook." "I did, sir. I'd like to read from it." "The boards read it." "With respect, sir, the boards read the left-hand column." He picked it up. "Page 4, 11th of October, 0505, 21 out. Then the numbers, and then the right-hand column, which is in the same hand and the same pencil, and which nobody in Bury St. Edmunds transcribed, because it isn't intelligence." He turned the book towards the light. 337, Cusack Mother Wilmington writes Tuesdays. 419, Vitelli wife Elena expecting in March. 228, Bell Mrs. Bell Ipswich, the cottage past the forge. He turned a page. 452, Mick, nobody in England, and beside that, sir, in the margin, BL. The hut had gone entirely still. "That's a 51-page document," Ward said, "and it is not a record of aircraft. It's a record of who is waiting for them. She started it in September because 5 men went into the North Sea in August, and it took 11 days to notify one of them, and she decided that would not happen at Wychmere again while she had a pencil." He set the book down. "The board should also have page 1. It has 1 entry on it, and it predates this station." He read it. "George Larkin, 19, HMS Kelvedon, North Atlantic, March 1941. Waiting, Dad B." In the second row, Tom Larkin put his hand over his eyes and left it there. "Her brother," Ward said. "That's where the book comes from. Colonel, you can bar her from my station. It's within your authority, and I'll carry out the order. But I'd like it on the record that the document in front of you is the only place in England where the men of this station are written down as belonging to somebody, and I would ask the board to consider what kind of security we imagine we're protecting." The colonel cleared his throat. "General, this board will also have to reach a view on the association itself. I'd rather you gave us something to work with." "Then I'll give you all of it, sir," Ward said, "and you can do what you like with it." He turned so that he was facing the room, not the table. "I have had this wing for 11 months. In that time I have signed the order for every mission that has gone out of these 3 fields. I take my coffee at that van at 5 o'clock in the morning, because it is 4 minutes in which nobody wants a decision out of me, and because that woman is the only person in this county who has ever asked me how I was and waited for the answer." He paused. "Nothing improper has occurred, and no man in this room believes otherwise, which is why they're all standing in my doorway. But I'll say the rest of it, since it's the actual charge. I'm in love with her. I have been since October, and I've never said so to her or to anyone, and I'm saying it now in a hut in front of the 8th Air Force, because a man filed a report that made her the guilty party in a matter where the only guilty party is me." He put the notebook down on the table. "There's a star on each of these shoulders, sir. If the board wants them, they're on the table with the book. What the board does not get is a finding against her." Nobody in the room had ever heard anything like it, and nobody ever forgot it. In the second row, B. Larkin sat with her hands in her lap and her face gone hot, and did not look up. The board found on the 16th. No case to answer. The notebook was returned to its owner. The report of the 3rd of January was struck, and Flight Lieutenant Ashcombe was returned to his parent service, and within the month, to Scotland. And on the second page of the finding, in 1 sentence of departmental English, Brigadier General Elias Ward was found to have exercised poor judgment in the maintenance of appropriate distance from a civilian on an operational station, and it was recommended that he be relieved of command of the 419th Combat Wing on reassignment, effective on or before the 1st of June, 1944. Prescott read it twice and did not smile, which surprised him. Ward brought the notebook back himself on foot, down the lane to Wychmere St. Mary, 2 miles in the rain. Tom Larkin opened the door. They looked at each other for a moment. Then the old man took off his cap, which he had not done in the office in October and had not done in the lane in February, and stood bareheaded in his own doorway in front of an American 33 years old. "She's out the back," he said. "She was in the yard with a bucket, and she stopped when she saw what he was carrying. They gave it back," she said. "It's yours." She took it and held it against her chest with both hands and stood there in the rain. And Ward stood in front of her and did not move to touch her. "You gave them your star," she said. "I offered it. They didn't take it. They took the wing instead, which is worse, and I'd have signed for that too." He looked past her at the wet field. "1st of June, I'm to be reassigned." "To where?" "They haven't said. Italy, probably." Bea nodded slowly. She was still holding the book against her. "You said a thing in that hut," she said, "in front of 100 men that you'd not said to me." "I know." "Why not to me?" "Because I'm to be gone by June," Ward said. "And because I've spent 11 months sending boys the age of your brother over Germany, and it seemed to me a man in that job has no business asking anyone to stand at a fence and count him." Bea wiped her face with the back of her wrist. It was raining hard enough that it did not particularly matter. "You've never once asked me," she said. "What's on the last page?" "You've never shown me." "No." She opened it at the back and turned it round. One ruled column, one name at the top of it, E. Ward. And in the small square beside it, in September's pencil, the word nobody, scratched out twice, hard enough to tear the paper. And underneath, in November's hand, me. Ward looked at it for a long moment. Then he took his cap off and stood in the rain with it in his hand like her father, and said nothing at all, because for once there was nothing in the world he could usefully say. By the middle of May, the whole of Suffolk was full of aeroplanes, and everybody on the base knew what that meant, and nobody said it. Ward had 9 days left in command. He spent them the way he had spent the other 330, at the window at 5, on the balcony at 4, and at a green Bedford van in the dark for 4 minutes that had long since stopped being about the coffee. Prescott had begun to take the morning briefings. Nobody had told him to. Nobody stopped him. "You'll want to sign these before the handover," Prescott said on the 20th, laying the target folders down. He hesitated in a way that was not like him. "Sir, for what it's worth." "Don't. I'd have taken the wing off you in a fair fight. You'd have got it in October if you'd waited," Ward said, "and I'd have shaken your hand for it." "Yes." Prescott picked up his cap. "That's rather the part I've been sitting with. Mick Dandridge got his 25th mission on the 22nd and did not go home." "They're offering," he said, sitting on an ammunition crate outside the van with his cap on the back of his head. "Instructor's billet, Texas, sunshine and no flak and some poor kid trying to kill us both on a takeoff run." "Take it," Bea said. "No, Mick." "Bea, there's a thing coming." He nodded east vaguely at the whole of occupied Europe. "You don't need me to tell you. Everybody with 2 eyes knows there's a thing coming. And I'm the second best pilot on this field, and the best one's got a desk." He grinned at her. "You can put me down as Mick another 6 weeks." She put him down as Mick. The order came on the 28th, and it was the deepest thing Wychmere had been given since Halberstadt. 24 ships off this field and 62 off the wing, maximum effort. An airframe works east of Brunswick at 25,000 feet. Everyone in the briefing hut understood what a maximum effort at the end of May was in aid of, and nobody said that either. Ward read the route through twice. Then he put his name on the top of the crew list for 452, in the right-hand seat. Pruitt found out at 11 that night, and came across the field at a speed a 39-year-old crew chief has no business at. "No, sir." "Sergeant." "No, sir. I'll say it in the hut with the door open if you want." Pruitt planted himself. "You are a general officer. You are not permitted to fly an operational mission. There's a piece of paper in Washington that says so, and you know the piece of paper, because you quote it at colonels. There's a waiver. There's a waiver for a general who's still got a command," Pruitt said. "You've got 4 days and a reassignment. Ain't nobody going to waive nothing for you." He jabbed a finger at the ceiling. "And that ain't even the half of it. Men with your clearance don't go over Germany. Not this month, not for about 9 reasons I ain't allowed to say out loud in my own hangar." "I was struck off the access list on the 17th of March, Ward said, "the day after the finding. Colonel Prescott holds that folder now, and I have not been read into one thing since, which is the only administrative kindness this army has ever done me. I know as much about June as you do, Sergeant. I read the newspaper. Then they'll have my star on the 6th of June instead of the 1st, Ward said, which is a distinction I've stopped being able to feel. Why? Ward was quiet for a moment. I've signed 141 orders on these fields and never once gone. That's the job and I've never argued with it. But the last one goes out at 25,000 feet with every ship this wing owns, and I'm not going to be the man who signed it from a window. He looked at the ceiling. It's 24 ships, Otis. Somebody has to be the 24th. Pruitt stood there breathing. You told her? No. You gonna? No. Then you're a coward in exactly one direction, Pruitt said, and I'm gonna go be one in the other. He told her at 4 in the morning, standing at the hatch of the van with his hat in his hands and his face wretched. He's in 452, right-hand seat, Mick's flying it. Bea put down the knife she was holding. Say it again. 24 ships, low-level daylight France. Pruitt would not look at her. Ma'am, I have never in my life told tales on an officer. I know. He'd bust me for this. He wouldn't. No, Pruitt admitted. He wouldn't. That's the trouble with him. Bea took her notebook out of her apron pocket and set it on the counter and opened it, and could not for a moment remember which page she wanted. Sergeant, is that his aeroplane over there? The one on the second hard stand? Yes, ma'am. Then go and be useful to it, she said, and I'll be at the fence. At 6 minutes past 5, the first of 24 B-17s went off the Wychmere runway into a sky just going grey at the edges. It took 23 minutes to lift the rest of them. Bea stood on the running board with her notebook against the roof of the van and counted them off the ground, and her hand was steady until 4:52, and then it was not. She wrote 0529-24 out. She turned to the back page and looked at the one ruled column and the one name at the top of it, and under me she wrote the date. Then there was nothing to do for 6 hours except feed 140 men who had not gone. They came back at 11 minutes past noon. She heard them first, the way she always did, a grinding on the southern horizon this time instead of the east, and she came out of the van with a crate in her arms and set it down on the concrete and started to count. 6, then 9, then 12 coming over the boundary hedge in ragged pairs, and along the fence the women were counting too, and one of them was saying a name over and over. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, a clot of them at once, and she lost the thread and had to start again, and she made herself do it slowly, and she got 19. 19, and the sky was empty. The first ship touched down. The second. Bea stood with the notebook open and the pencil in her fist and did not write anything down, because you did not write it until the number stopped moving, and the number had stopped moving, and it was 19. Then Pruitt, 40 feet away on the wing of a ship with a wrench in his hand, said, There. 2 more, very low, coming in from the wrong direction entirely, over the village and the church spire at Woodbridge. 21. There ain't a 4th engine on that one, Pruitt said. There ain't a 3rd. Bear did not answer. She had got down off the running board and she was walking, and then she was not walking, and 40 yards of wet grass went by without her noticing any of it. 452 came over the hedge on 2 engines, with a hole in the vertical stabilizer. You could have put a bicycle through, and put its wheels down at the very start of the concrete, and rolled the whole length of the runway, and stopped. Nobody on the field pretended to work. The waist door opened. Men came out of it and off the wing and down the ladder, and Mick Dandridge came out last but one, hatless, shouting something at the top of his voice that nobody could hear over the fire truck. And then Ward. He came down onto the hard stand with his flying jacket over his shoulder and his hair wrecked and a smear of hydraulic fluid down one cheek, and he looked up, and there was a woman in a WVS headscarf standing on his concrete, which she had been told not to do since October. He stopped. Miss Larkin, 21, Bea said. What? 21 back. Her voice came out wrong. She held up the notebook. 24 out at 29 minutes past 5, and 21 back at 12 minutes past 12, and I counted them 4 times, and you weren't in the first 19. Bea, you weren't in the first 19 too. I know. You didn't tell me. No. Because you thought it would be kinder. Yes. It was not, Bea said, kinder. And then she crossed the last 3 feet of it and took hold of the front of his shirt with both hands, notebook and all, and kissed him in front of the crew of 452, the fire crew, 206 enlisted men, the tower, and Calder Roy Prescott, who had walked down with the crash crew, and who now turned round and studied the middle distance with enormous concentration. It went on a while. Somebody, probably Cusack, started it, and then the whole hardstand went up like a stadium. Whistling hats, a wrench beaten against a wing 3 times. And Ward did not stop and did not let go, and when he finally lifted his head, he had the decency to look at the ground. "Sergeant Pruitt," he said. "Sir." "Get them back to work." "Absolutely not, sir," said Pruitt. That night, they walked the perimeter track in the dark all the way round 3.5 miles, past hardstands where men were working under hooded lamps. 9 days, B said. 4 now. 4. She had her arm through his. Where do they send a general who's been relieved of a wing? Nowhere good. Air staff, probably. A desk in Grosvenor Square and a title with 4 words in it. He watched the flare path lamps. It doesn't matter. That's the part I'm no good at explaining. Try. He stopped walking. I've had 11 months of holding 400 names in my head, and no one holding mine, Ward said. I told myself that was the arithmetic of the job. I believed it. And then a farm girl with a pencil wrote me into a column, and I have been useless ever since. You're not useless, you've been unbearable. That too. B turned to face him on the track. You know what the worst part of this morning was, she said. It wasn't the counting, it was after, the 2 minutes after 19 when I thought, right, that's it, and there's nobody I'm allowed to tell. I'd have gone home to my father's kitchen and peeled potatoes. No telegram would have come to me. Nobody would have written to me. I'm not your wife or your fiancé or your anything. I'm a woman with a T-van who'd have found out in the mess by Thursday. B. I've counted this whole base home for 9 months, she said, and I'd have had no standing whatever to grieve you. Ward took her hands. Then fix it, he said. What? Fix it. Marry me. He said it plainly, standing on wet asphalt with an engine running somewhere behind him. I've got 4 days here and a war on and no house, no money to speak of, and a personnel file that now contains the phrase, poor judgment. I'm 33, I've been moved 11 times in 15 years, and I have nothing at all to offer you except that I would like, for the rest of my life, to be a man who is counted. B looked at him for a long moment. Say the last part again. I want to be counted, Ward said, by you, that's the whole of it. Yes, she said. Yes? Yes, Elias, yes. She laughed once, and it broke in the middle. You needn't look so shocked, you've had it in writing since November. The United States Army did not, as it turned out, approve. It took Ward 11 days to discover the full architecture of it. A commanding officer's written consent, a 2-month waiting period, a security investigation of the intended bride, character references from clergy or civil authority in her parish, a financial statement and, for an officer of general rank, an endorsement from theatre headquarters, because a brigadier's wife is a matter of policy, and a file in Bury St. Edmunds, struck but not incinerated, containing 4 paragraphs about a woman at a wire. He was told on the 3rd of June, politely, by a major in Grosvenor Square, that the endorsement was unlikely. On what grounds? Ward said. The board finding, sir, it's on your record. Marrying the woman rather confirms it. It confirms that I told the truth in March, Ward said, which I did under oath in front of 100 witnesses, and I notice nobody has ever suggested otherwise. Sir, my advice. Major, I'm going to say a thing, and I'd like you to write it down. I have signed 141 operational orders. I have 562 names. I have never once asked this army for a favor, a posting, a leave, an exception or a promotion, and I have accepted every order it has ever given me, including the one that took my wing. He leaned forward. I am asking now. Once. Put it up. The major put it up. It came back refused on the 9th of June, 3 days after the invasion, when nobody in England had any attention to spare. Prescott took the wing on the 1st of June. Ward stayed on at Wychmere Heath, in a spare room over the adjutant's office for 5 weeks more, waiting on paperwork, which is the least dignified thing that can happen to a general officer, and which he did not appear to mind in the slightest. Ward did not argue with Grosvenor Square again. He went to a farmhouse on the Woodbridge Road with his cap in his hands and asked Tom Larkin for 20 minutes. They sat at the kitchen table, where Rupert Ashcombe had put a small box down in December. They've said no, Ward said. Then that's that. No, sir, it isn't. There's an appeal. It's slow and it's ugly, and it goes through 4 desks, and every one of those desks will read a security file about your daughter before it reads anything else. He turned his cap around. I can fight it as a Brigadier General, which means I write letters and pull rank, and it takes 2 years, and she is a paragraph in an argument between senior officers the entire time. Or I stop being one. Tom Larkin put down his cup. You'd resign? No man resigns anything this year, Mr. Larkin. I'm in until it finishes and 6 months after that, and so is every officer in England. Ward turned the cap around again. But a star isn't a rank, it's a loan. Every general in this theatre holds a temporary commission for the emergency, with a permanent one underneath it. And mine says Lieutenant Colonel. I can ask to be relieved of the temporary grade and fall back to my own. And what does that buy you? A lieutenant colonel who wants to marry an Englishwoman needs his commanding officer's consent and a security check on the lady. That's a form and a fortnight. He set the cap on the table. A brigadier general needs an endorsement from theatre headquarters because a general's wife is a matter of policy. There is no policy in this army that will ever endorse her, so I'll stop being one. Tom Larkin looked at him for a while. You'd go down 2 grades over a form. I'd go down to private, Ward said, and when it finishes I'll come out with no rank at all, no land, no trade, and 40 acres of your ground under concrete. That's the man I'm asking whether you'd have in your family. The old man was quiet a long time. You gave my girl her book back in the rain, he said. Walked 2 miles with it under your coat so it wouldn't wet. That's not a qualification. It is here, said Tom Larkin. B heard it from Pruitt again, because Ward was constitutionally incapable of announcing a thing about himself. She found him on the tower balcony at 9 at night, on the ammunition crate with no coat on. You're giving up the star. I'm giving up the waiting, Ward said. There's a difference and I'd like you to hear it because I don't want to be a man you're grateful to. The star was never mine. They put it on a 33-year-old because the men above me were killed, and I've spent every day since trying to be worth the accident. And now? Now I've been told the price of you is a piece of metal on my shoulder, he said, and I want it on the record that I did not think about it for even 1 entire minute. B sat down on the other crate. They'll say you threw it away on a farm girl. They'll say that. And where do they put a brand new lieutenant colonel? Grosvenor Square. Bomb damage assessment, a desk, a magnifying glass, and several thousand photographs taken by men I'm no longer permitted to send anywhere. He almost smiled. 91 miles. There's a train at 6 on a Friday. In the mess. In the papers, possibly, if that photographer's still about. Very likely. And you don't care. Beatrice, Ward said, I signed a piece of paper this afternoon giving back the only thing I ever earned. And then I walked out of the building and across the field, and I was happy, which I have not been at any point since 1938. So, no, I find I don't care at all. She took out the notebook and the pencil and turned to the back page. Under E. Ward, under me, under the date of the 28th of May, she wrote one more line and turned it round so he could see it in the light coming up through the balcony door. Home for good. The telegram about Mick Dandridge came to the base on the 11th of August 1944, and Otis Pruitt walked it down the lane himself because there was nobody else it could go to. B read it standing in the yard. Where? Marshalling yard outside Rouen, 3 ships. Pruitt had his cap in his fist. They saw 4 shoots. 4. Not his. She folded the paper in half and put it in her apron pocket and stood there for a moment with her hand flat on the gatepost. He wanted to go home to Missouri in February, she said. There was an instructor's billet in Texas and he laughed at me. I know it. He was the 2nd best pilot on that field, and he told everyone so. He wasn't wrong neither, said Pruitt. That night she got the notebook down from the shelf and turned to the page where he was, and beside 452, Mick, nobody in England, BL, she wrote the date and the town, and then she sat with the pencil in her hand for a long while before she added the last part. Waiting B, Elias, Otis, everyone on this field. She left the 4 shoots out of it. There was no column for hoping. The reversion came through on the 11th of July 1944, and Elias Ward went to a desk in Grosvenor Square 4 days later as a lieutenant colonel and stayed at it for 11 months. He caught the 6 o'clock out of Liverpool Street on a Friday and the 6:10 back on the Sunday night, 41 weekends out of 48. The Army's consent to the marriage came through in September over the signature of a colonel who had never heard of him, and cost 14 shillings in stamps. He carried it in his pocket for 2 days and then put it on the mantelpiece at the farm. Bay read it twice and did not name a day. Not while they're still going out, she said. She said it again in November, and in February, and in March, and it was the only subject on which she was ever short with him. I'll not stand up in a church in my mother's dress and count tail numbers at the same time. When that field's quiet, I'll marry you inside a month. The last mission went out of Wychmere Heath on the 25th of April 1945. The war in Europe finished a fortnight after that, and the bells at Wychmere St. Mary were rung by 2 riggers and a corporal from Ohio, who had never held a bell rope in his life, and did not let it stop him. They were married on the 23rd of June 1945, in the church at Wychmere St. Mary, 6 weeks after the war in Europe ended, and while the base was still full of men waiting for ships home. It was a small church, and it did not stay small. 211 American servicemen came down the lane on foot because there was no transport for a wedding, and the ones who could not get in stood in the churchyard among the stones in the sun and heard it through the open door. Somebody had done the flowers with what Suffolk had in June, which is a great deal. Otis Pruitt stood up as best man in a uniform pressed so hard it could have flown itself, and dropped the ring, and caught it off his own boot, and said, "Sir," out loud in a church, and 211 men laughed. Ward was married in the uniform of a lieutenant colonel, because he did not own a suit and would not borrow one. Tom Larkin gave his daughter away, and did not manage the whole sentence, and nobody minded. And at the front, at the end of the second pew, there was a chair with nobody in it, and a folded card on the seat with one word written on it in pencil. Mick. Bea had put it there herself at 7 that morning. She did not explain it to anyone, and nobody asked. And after the service, one by one, 40 or 50 men went and put a hand on the back of that chair on their way out into the light. Collis Roy Prescott came. He stood at the back in his best blue with his cap under his arm and shook Ward's hand outside afterwards. "General." "Not for a year, Roy." "Old habit." Prescott looked at the churchyard full of enlisted men eating sandwiches off a trestle table. "I've been asked to give you a message, and I've been putting it off since Tuesday." "Then give it." "Washington wants you. The Starback, the finding expunged, the whole March business lifted off your record as though it never happened. It's a planning billet, strategic air, the new organization. They're building the whole thing from nothing, and they want men who ran wings." He turned his cap over. "It's a serious offer, Elias. In 15 years it's an air force of its own, and you'd be a very senior man in it. You're 34. You'd be the youngest of everything all over again." Ward looked past him. Bea was at the Lich Gate in a dress her mother had been married in, arguing cheerfully with Cusack about scones. "No," he said. "Take a week." "I don't need a week." "Take a week anyway," Prescott said, "so that in 1960 you can't tell yourself you were rash." Ward thought about it. "All right," he said. "A week." He took the week, and on the 30th of June he wrote 4 lines to Washington, declining with thanks, and posted it in the box outside the forge on his way to fetch a heifer that had got through a hedge onto the Woodbridge Road. He put in for release from active duty the same morning. It took the army until November to agree, which by the standards of 1945 was indecent haste. Ward spent that winter learning to be a civilian, which he was catastrophically bad at. He could organize a bomber station for 900 men, and could not at 35 drive a tractor in a straight line. He put a fence post in crooked in February, and Tom Larkin looked at it for a full minute without speaking, which was worse than anything he could have said. "In my defense," Ward said, "I was in a war." "So was the post," said Larkin. He was better with the books. He got the farm accounts out of a biscuit tin and into a ledger inside a fortnight, found 11 years of underpayment in the tenancy agreement, and wrote one letter to the Ashcombe estate office that produced a cheque and an apology, and a great deal of silence from Ashcombe itself. "You enjoyed that," Bea said. "I enjoyed it enormously." "You're a petty man, Elias." "I'm a thorough man," said Ward, "and I've been waiting since December of 1943. The Air Ministry derequisitioned Wychmere Heath in the spring of 1946. The huts were sold off in lots. The hangars went to a firm in Ipswich that made agricultural sheds. And the runways, 11 inches of concrete, laid over the best ground in the parish, were broken up and carted away as hardcore for a road scheme in Essex, a process that took 4 months, made a noise you could hear in the village, and required a man to stand in a field in a donkey jacket every day arguing with contractors about exactly where the edge of the 40 acres was. He had the 1938 tithe map. He had the original requisition peg. He had in a leather case 3 years of correspondence he had begun collecting in October of 1943 for no reason he had ever explained to anyone. "You knew," Bea said, standing at the field edge with a flask. "I knew what a requisition order says about restoration. Nobody ever reads the second page." Ward took the flask. "Your father's had 40 acres under concrete since April of 43. I've had that map in a drawer since the week he came to my office and refused to sit down." They stood and watched a steam lorry take another load out of the gate. In the village and then in the county paper, and then, briefly and to his horror, in a national one, the story went round as the American general who gave the runway back to the farm, which was not accurate in any particular. Ward wrote a letter of correction. It was not printed. Tom Larkin walked the 40 acres alone the day the last of it came up, in November, and put his boot in the raw dirt, and then went home and did not say one word about it, that night or ever. They drilled it with barley in the spring of 1947. It came up thin the first year and well the second. Georgiana Ward was born on the 4th of September 1946, in the front bedroom of the farmhouse, at 5:10 in the morning. Ward stood in the yard afterwards in the dark, because there was nowhere else to be, and the sky over the old field was just going grey at the edges, and he was quite sure he had never in his life been awake at that hour for a good reason before. "Georgiana," B said when he came up. She was grey with exhaustion and entirely certain. "After my brother." "George." "Georgiana. She'll be George by the time she can walk, they always are." She looked down at the bundle. 19 he was, and there's nobody left called it. "Then there is now," Ward said. He wrote it in the notebook himself that morning, in handwriting that did not match a single other entry in 53 pages. A new page at the front, above the line about HMS Kelvedon. "Georgiana Ward, born 0510, 4th of September 1946, waiting all of us." The harvest of 1947 was a disaster, because the winter before it had been the worst in living memory, and the spring had drowned what the frost had missed. They lost most of the barley on the old runway ground, which everybody in the parish had been quietly watching. There was no money that autumn. There was a real argument about the roof. "It's £40, B said. "It's £86, and I've had the estimate on the table for a week, and you've walked past it every day and pretended you haven't. We'll patch the north side and do it properly next year. There won't be a next year for that timber. It's gone at the purlin end, and if it goes in January, we lose the whole thing, and the child's room is under it." Ward put both hands flat on the kitchen table. "Beatrice, I've written it out 4 ways. There isn't a version where we don't do the roof. And where does £86 come from?" "The pension, all of it for a year." "That's yours." "It is not remotely mine." "You gave up a star," B said. "And now you'll give up the pension, and in 10 years you'll be a man who gave everything up in a village where nobody knew you were anybody." The room went quiet. "Is that what you think this is?" Ward said. "Sometimes at 2 in the morning, yes." He sat down opposite her. "In March of 1944 I stood in a hut and offered 2 stars to a full colonel for a 51-page notebook," he said. "He didn't take them, and I went to bed that night and slept 8 hours, which I had not done since 1942. It was the first arithmetic I ever got right." He pushed the estimate across the table. "The roof is £86. Sign the thing." B looked at it for a long moment. Then she picked up the pencil. It was always a pencil in that house, and signed it, and then put her hand over his on the table and left it there. "You're still not doing the ridge yourself," she said. "I'm entirely capable." "Religious, you put a fence post in crooked." "That was 1946. "It's still there," said B, "and it's still crooked, and my father shows it to people." Milo Ward was born in February of 1949 and was named for a pilot from Missouri, and by 1952 he was 3 years old and had already worked out that the fastest way to make his mother stop what she was doing was to run at the fence. The old perimeter fence was still there. That was the strange thing about it. The huts had gone and the hangars had gone and the concrete had gone into a road in Essex, but 400 yards of chain link and concrete post along the eastern edge of the Larkin ground had been too much trouble to pull out, and so it stayed, with barley growing to the foot of it on one side and rough grass on the other. Georgiana Ward, aged 5, considered that fence her office. She had found the notebook in the dresser in March and had been told by her mother exactly what it was and exactly how to hold it, and had thereafter carried it about the farm with an air of enormous administrative importance. On an afternoon in June of 1952, B came out of the back door with a basket and found her daughter standing on the bottom rail of the old fence, with the notebook open against the wire and a pencil in her fist, looking at the sky. "George, what are you doing?" "Counting." "Counting what, love? There's nothing up there." "There is," said George. There was. A single tiger moth, yellow, wandering across the parish at 800 feet on its way to spray a field of beet at Wickham Market, making the only aircraft noise Wychmere St. Mary had heard in 3 years. "One out," George reported. "Shall I write it?" B set the basket down. "Show me how you're holding the pencil." "Like this." "That's right." She put her hand over her daughter's on the wire. "Now, you always do the number first and then the name and then who's waiting. That's the order. It doesn't work if you do it the other way round." "Who's waiting for that one?" "Somebody at Wickham Market," B said. who'll be very cross about his beat. Down the field, at the far end of the 40 acres that had been Runway 2, a man was walking up the headland towards them, with his jacket over his shoulder and a 3-year-old riding on his hip. And he was 41 years old and had not worn a uniform in 6 years, and every single day of it he had come home across that ground at the same hour. George saw him and went off the fence rail like a bird off a wire. Bea stayed where she was. She took the notebook and turned it to the back, past 53 pages of tail numbers and names, past Cusack and Vitelli and Bell, past a boy who went into the North Atlantic in 1941 and a boy who did not come out of a marshalling yard outside Rouen, to the one ruled column with one name at the top of it. Ward. Nobody scratched out twice hard enough to tear the paper. Me. Home for good. She licked the pencil, which he had told her 100 times was a filthy habit, and wrote one more line under it and shut the book. 1 out this morning, 1 back counted. Then she picked up the basket and went down the headland to meet him,